I'm delighted to welcome you all to our Cyprus seminar series. And as you can see, we've got a big change today in that we have our speaker, Dr. Evi Margaritis, who is actually at our institute in Amman, which is a wonderful opportunity for us to have Dr. Evi in our institute and having a look at our archaeobotanical collections and talking about potential future collaborations. So it's very, very exciting. Before we move on though, I do want to welcome those of you who haven't joined us before and those of you who are coming back and who have been enjoying this seminar series as we all have. For those of you new to CBRL, I'll just quickly mention that we exist to fund and support and facilitate excellent research across the humanities and social sciences across the Levant. And we're really interested in human stories from the most ancient times all the way through to the modern challenges facing people today. So we're engaging in all of that research. Now, today is the fifth and final version of our Cyprus seminar series, and you can see from the schedule up on the screen that we've moved from zoo archaeology to heritage sites to glass to dendroarchaeology, and we end up here with a topic that we all love, which is food. So if you're not starting hungry, I'm sure we'll all be hungry at the end of this. As you all know, or as you hopefully know, we have collaborated in this Cyprus series with the Cyprus Institute. The Cyprus Institute is a world-class research and educational institution and a regional centre of excellence with a particular focus on science and technology. And as part of this collaboration, we've been very honoured to welcome some of the Cyprus Institute's foremost researchers, really interested in archaeology and culture and science and technology. Now, I'm going to hand over shortly to our Deputy Director in Amman, who will introduce Dr. Evi. But I just wanted to mention that although this is the final seminar in this series, we've got a packed list of activities coming up in the future. So we're going to have a big workshop at the end of March, which people will be able to join online, looking at the medieval Levant and global connections, and we'll be advertising that soon. We've got some exciting lectures by individuals coming up. We've got our graduate network lectures coming up, which will focus on research methodologies. And over the summer, we'll be holding a Syria lecture series. So we hope that for those of you who haven't joined us before, you'll continue to participate in CBRL's community and join us as we move through these exciting events. So without further ado, I'll remind you that as a webinar, please paste your comments or type your comments in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll field questions from the Zoom room as well as in person once the lecture is finished. So I will now hand over to our Deputy Director, Dr. Fatma Mari, who's going to introduce Evi for us. So I'll wish you all, I hope you all enjoy the lecture as much as I'm definitely going to. Over to you, Fatma.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, everyone. It's our pleasure this evening to introduce our speaker for tonight's presentations, from ancient fields to modern plates, the culinary heritage of Cyprus and the Mediterranean diet, by our speaker, Dr. Evi Margaritis. Evi is Associated Professor at the Cyprus Institute, based at the Science and Technology in Archaeology and Culture Research Center. As part of her PhD and post-PhD fieldwork and research, Dr. Margaritis has gained extensive experience working in Greece, Cyprus, Jordan, and Italy, and is in charge of archaeological studies of research projects run by numerous universities and research institutions. She is one of the leading experts in archaeobotanical research in the Eastern Mediterranean and the only archaeobotanist based in Cyprus. She has extensively published in peer-reviewed journals and collective volumes. She has been working with national and international teams, with other specialists and with students, and leads her own teams in various projects. She has initiated Erasmus programs in order to attract students to be trained in archaeobotany in the Cyprus Institute. Currently, she is the Assistant Director of the Cambridge Curious Excavation Project, one of the most multidisciplinary projects in the Eastern Mediterranean. You're welcome, Dr. Eve, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Jane, I'm very sorry that you're not here. I looked at your facilities and the reference collection in particular, and I'm sure that we can start different venues of collaboration. We are very happy to welcome you in Cyprus to see there what we're doing at the Cyprus Institute. And of course, let's see what we can do with all these plants and animals that you have here at Amman. So I'm going to start with a subject that it's very, very common to you. Of course, we're not going to talk about only modern food, but we're going to talk about ancient food and ancient the culinary heritage of Cyprus. So the focus of today is the prehistory of Cyprus and mostly the second millennium BCE, but I will draw to other periods as well. So this part of the work that I'm doing was funded by the Research and Innovation Foundation of Cyprus, much needed funding for all the work that we do. And as a general statement for those that are not very adapted to what archaeobotany is that we don't focus like on the properties of plants, but the observations are based on anthropology, sociology, and history. So we are interested in what people are doing with these plant remains, and not only the plants per se. So we focus on the role of food as a medium of communication, enhancing social relations, and distinguishing between those belong or are excluded from the group or communal cooking and eating. This is very similar to what we're doing today. Yeah, it's very important who you are dining with, who you're sharing your food with. So that was what was going on in the past as well. And we want to see and recreate the human agency on that front. So how these plant remains are preserved. So for those that have been in Cyprus, we're talking about waterlogged remains of a shipwreck off the coast of Larnaca, the shipwreck of Mazotos, which is excavated by Stella Demestic of the University of Cyprus. And there, in amphora, they have found olive stones. So possibly olives were stored in the amphora, and we find them. So this is when the waterlogged preservation is when actually you don't have any oxygen, water comes and covers everything, and then you don't have any bacteria, and there you have the plant remains. Another mode of preservation is by desiccation. So in Egypt, sometimes here, not that often, but sometimes here as well, we have, because of the high temperatures, we do have a dry, you have the preservation of the remains as dried, as desiccated. So whatever comes into the site on the excavation, we do find them. But the most common mode of preservation in Eastern Mediterranean, and now we're talking about Cyprus, is by carbonization. So you need a mode of fire, some source of fire, because either people were cooking, other people were actually used fire to clean their houses or their refuse when they're cooking refuse. So then we do have the preservation by carbonization. In this mode, you shouldn't have very high temperatures, because then everything turns to ash and you're not find plant remains. Now, how we recover these plant remains? Yeah, okay. Depending where you are, you can improvise. So people here, they're in the sea. We have done that as well. Or people are recycling water, so we don't spend much water, especially in this part of the world. Water is very valuable. But a common flotation machine, like we call it, looks like that. So it's a barrel, it's a system inside that you put a net and you put the sediment from the excavation from different contexts. And then because of the plant remains are carbonized, they float. We collect them in this very nice sieve. There, how it is, we dry them, and then we look at them under the microscope. Of course, what it remains in the net of in the barrel, we sort it as well because it can contain plant remains, but the majority goes in the sieve. But you do have other minute archaeological finds like beads or microfauna or other remains that you wouldn't have found them if we didn't have the flotation. Sometimes, and it's often actually, people, excavators, I mean, directors of big projects, they're doing flotation actually to retrieve these small archaeological finds rather than the seeds. Okay, but this is, it's a win-win situation, I suppose. So, and then, as I said, we dry them, the residues as well, what remains there, and we look at under the microscope. As I say, the archaeobotanist toolkit that you do have it here, not everything, but you do have a lot, is a reference collection here. Sorry, is a reference collection that you have modern plant remains that you can actually compare what you find with that, and of course a lot of atlases to see what is to do the comparison. And I usually say refer to these plant remains, the laggy big ones, figs that sometimes they're found complete, or almonds that they're found to complete, dates and olives that you can actually see during the excavation, and some people are collecting them. But most of the plant remains, or not most of the plant remains, but a lot of the plant remains look like that. Okay, so very, very minute. And if we don't do what is necessary, we're not going to find anything. So, as I said, we need modern reference collection to compare what, how barley looked in the past and how it is today. And you will find that even though they have been in the sediment for thousands of years and they have gone through the flotation, they do survive. They're very, very robust, and they want actually to tell us what was going on in the past. So they're very, very stubborn, let's say that. And here are the atlases that I was telling you about, which is a key tool for our research. Now, in 1976, Jane Renfrew, who was one of the leading archaeobotanists worldwide, but mostly in Greece in the 60s and the 70s, in 1976, published an article that's called First Aid for Seeds. Somebody would think that since then, decades afterwards, we have actually solved this problem of not sampling when we go to archaeological sites. This is not the case because of various reasons, but let's focus in Cyprus. More prehistoric sites and certainly more Neolithic sites were excavated until recently in the island. So we do have a lot of Neolithic sites and not many sites later. And of course, we had until recently also very, very few information for the first millennium, so for the historical periods, but I'll come back to that. So when we refer to archaeobotany, we're talking about seed, as I told you, wood, so information about the landscape and what kind of trees and shrubs were around and they were used for fuel or building. And then we have starches. We all know what starch is, and we extract starch from the sediment or from tools and pottery. And of course, phytoliths, some plant remains, when they decay, they leave traces of silica components, and then they have specific morphological characteristics, and you can actually determine what kind of species that is. So the analysis of the seeds and the charcoal are straightforward in the sense that you retrieve them through the flotation and you analyze them and identify them under the microscope, while all the sediments go to be processed. but the micro remains, so phytoliths and starches, need extra processing. So you take very, very small amount of sediment, which is not the case when you retrieve seeds and charcoal. You need a lot of sediment then. And then you have to use all these, a series of chemical processing to retrieve starches and phytoliths. So even though you need a very, very small amount of sediment at the excavation, the process afterwards is time consuming, which for the seeds and charcoal is kind of the opposite. So if we want to focus on Cypriot archaeobotany, here are how many Neolithic sites we had until recently and how many early and middle Bronze Age. And this is the work of Leilani Lucas, which is one of the first comprehensive work that has been done in Cyprus, which involved the material and data from many sites of Cyprus. And Leilani, this is from Leilani as well, is what kind of cereals we have. And because this is, you cannot really see it. Sorry, this is, yeah, they cannot see me, yeah? Or they can. We have a pointer. I guess this is from the ceramic, and let's go to late Cypriot, and this is cereals, and this is again cereal, but only barley. And if I want to go and zoom in here, you see from the early prehistory, you have iron, corn, and emmer, mostly, and then you have and a little bit of free threshing wheat, and then this continues. But when you go to the Bronze Age, you have a lot of emmer and free threshing wheat, which are the late Cypriot, or the late Bronze Age, you have mostly free threshing wheat, so you don't have the other two, or you have less of the other two. This, however, I have to say that this was done, the analysis was done when we didn't have a lot of late Bronze Age sites in Cyprus. And then you'll see at a moment now, this has changed. So we have more data. And if you want to go to barley, you can see that, especially here, you have a lot of barley, but it goes downwards towards the late Bronze Age. And similar situation we have for the pulses, which you have a lot of pulses during the Neolithic, but as you go towards the Bronze Age, you don't have as many species as you had before. And this shows that the Neolithic people were experimenting more, while the Bronze Age, well, they were not, I don't want to say traditional, but they didn't explore all the possibilities that they had. Now, this is how Cyprus looks today with all these, some of the sites, but we have all these additional sites that the last 5 or 6 years have been added to the database of the Cypriot archaeobotany, and I'll come back to that. So I'll start with Pila Kokinokremos, which is a very, very important site in Larnaca area, which is like here. And it's excavated by the Belgian teams and of Ghent and Louvain, yes. And this is, as I said, a late Bronze Age site. I have to mention that all Cypriot sites, no, I don't want to say all, but the majority of the Cypriot sites do not produce a lot of plant remains. There are different taphonomical reasons for that, but one of the main reasons is that we find the architectural remains very close to the surface, so most of it is not very well preserved. So that's a problem. So we need to go back again and again every year to collect more samples if we want to have any meaningful database. Though Kokinokremos is an exception, because before I go to that, you can see that it's situated in a plateau overlooking a plain, and there in a shaft, we were very, very lucky because they found a 30 centimeters layer of charred material. So that is one of the most wealthy or like numerous assemblages of archaeobotany for Bronze Age Cyprus. And the main cereal that we have found is hundreds of barley grains, which was very lucky because they could have C14 dates and they did pollen analysis. Somebody else did pollen analysis, but with the C14, we knew exactly when that was the episode had happened. And the combination of the plant remains of the seeds and the charcoal shows that we had high values of xerophytic wood and shrub. So that indicates desert and warmly mixed forest. And the evidence suggests a dry environment and agricultural activity was very low. That goes hand in hand with the climate change theory for the end of the late Bronze Age that we have actually seen in Cyprus and in northern Levant. If we want to go to another late Bronze Age site, which is Agios Ozomenos, it's close to Nicosia in the middle of the Messaora basin. And what we have there, we have found buildings, which was a lot of storerooms. So we had a lot of pithy, and we didn't know what, of course, they were stored. We were thinking that we're going to have to find cereals and pulses. And we were lucky that half of it was destroyed by fire, so we could actually see what was going on. But we were very surprised when instead of cereals and pulses, we found grape remains. So it was not only grape remains, but grape fruits as well. So we were thinking that they were storing raisins, and that was a very important product for trade as well. And of course, we don't exclude the production of wine. If we go further down to the Limassol area, here, for those that you know Cyprus, Erimi Laonion to Porakou, a middle Bronze Age site, excavated by Luca Bobadieri of the University of Siena. There, we have found a lot of we have found a lot of weeds, so wild flora. We don't have a lot of cereals and pulses. And because they have found a lot of workshops, we don't know what to make of that, because we don't have actually staple crops. Yes. So here, but it's not connected here. This is, yeah. What can I do? With that,
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
fine.
Okay, because they cannot see the pointer.
Yeah, you can. Okay.
All right, yes, I'll do that. Yeah, thanks. All right, yeah, I was saying that we don't have a lot of cereals and pulses, and in a huge site. And we say, okay, why we don't have that? And maybe there is another way of agricultural practices that they were exploring their wide environment around. That's something to be considered. But one of the evidence that we have is evidence for something that it's called Buclusoides arvensis. It's a field cromwell. It's a weed, but its root is used to actually have to produce red color. That's how it looks like. And because we had the excavator has identified workshops for textiles, we're thinking that they were using this plant possibly for to produce red color for the textile production. Now, since we are focusing on the Bronze Age, what kind of agricultural aids we have in the Bronze Age? And it's very interesting because the domesticated cow was introduced to Cyprus sometime during the early Neolithic period, but it inexplicably disappeared from Cyprus. We don't know why. Shortly afterward its initial arrival, and was not reintroduced to the island until the beginning of the Bronze Age. So you have a period that you don't have cow at all, and we don't know why. People, archaeologists, are trying to say why this is the case. As a farm animal, the cow provides both traction, power for plowing, and a source of ample manure. So these aspects of the cow allow for the farming of less fertile land and facilitate agricultural extensification, which means that the growing of crops with minimum input and maximum output. But remember that for several hundred years, this was not possible in Cyprus. Oops, sorry. So the absence of the cow, as we said in Cyprus, seems to have delayed the transition from small-scale intensive farming to large-scale agricultural regime in the island. This is something that was happening in other areas like Crete, for example, but in Cyprus is delayed possibly because of the absence of cow. Its reintroduction at the start of the Bronze Age can be viewed as the beginning of a major shift in farming practices on Cyprus. And the possibility of plough agriculture and the additional source of manure, as we said, allowed settlements to occupy less fertile land located closer to the island's copper resources. This change, however, in the island's settlement pattern did not occur until the later Bronze Age, possibly due to a period of agricultural experimentation with the cow before moving to areas of high-risk farming. So people wanted to see what was possible and then introduced the farming practices that they thought that they could. This is a work that Anna Spirou, who was the first speaker of our series, is very involved and very recently published something about the cattle, and but earlier, of course, not the late Bronze Age, and using isotope analysis as well. So if we want to talk about cash crops, and cash crops, we refer to crops like olive and grape, which you don't need them to survive. Okay, you don't. Olive has a little bit of nutritional value, but wine or grape certainly doesn't. We can live without them, but let's say that. So we have information in Cyprus about wine and olive oil production from installations and pottery, and this is from Alassa on the left. Sorry, here that Sophocles Hatzisabbas thinks that this is. That there was a vat here and the liquid, possibly wine, was coming through this channel. And this, of course, one of the very, very important pottery from Pyrgos, where you can see a figure here treating grapes. You have the vat, and then you have the vat where the wine is actually, or the mast in this case, is going. And then we have at Kalabassos, here, and no, I think that Kalabassos is here and Maroni is here, where these have been these installations have been interpreted as olive oil production installations. So what we do, apart from the material culture that we do have, what we do in several assemblages at the moment in Cyprus, we do something that is called geometric morphometry. So we take olives from their geobotanical data, from various sites in Cyprus, and we photograph them. And then, in collaboration with Clémence Pagnou from the university, the Museum of Natural History of Paris and the University of Montpellier, they have a vast database of olive remains from modern olive remains from Eastern Mediterranean. So their team, what they have done is they have been to different places in Eastern Mediterranean, including Jordan, and they have sampled different olive remains. So they have it in a database, and then we and other people that they want to do this kind of analysis, we have their data and we put them in their database, and then we see what kind of affiliations our data from prehistory or from the first millennium has to modern varieties. So this is a very, very important study. And we do a similar method for the grapes. So the grapes that we have found at the moment in the Bronze Age in Cyprus, we're trying to see what kind of varieties they're coming from, and if we do have this kind of varieties in Cyprus now. And this is something that we have published on the matter. So if we want to see what we know about olive and grape in Cyprus, is that, of course, they are commodity crops. Value was added in the transformation of these crops into dry fruits, as we said, for the site of Sozomenos, oil and wine, increasing their longevity while reducing their bulk, and facilitating their transportation as prestige goods. Remember, we don't need wine to survive, okay? Possibly we need wine to be intoxicated, but that's a different story. And that was, I think that was the reason that a lot of, that was so prestigious, because they were getting drunk. So that's something that we have to think about for human nature when we're interpreting their botanical record. So new basis for manufactured food commodities for exchange to be routed through cities, because it's the Bronze Age, we have urban centers, accompanying the general increase in trade of specialized craft items. So that goes hand in hand. And this development can be seen as parallel and comparable with the specialization of animal secondary products, such as wool, milk, and animal traction. So if we go now to a site which is close, this is the area of Paphos, which is here at the west part of Cyprus, and this is the site of Flora Carpalures. And even though it dates to the middle to late Chalcolithic period, so the 3rd millennium, and not the later sites that I was talking about, I wanted to talk about it because we have a combination of different proxies of archaeobotanical remains, and that's why the site is worth mentioning, because we have extensive sampling, but the archaeobotanical remains are very scarce. So in order to maximize the information, what we did, it was that we apart from the seeds and the wood charcoal, which, as I said, it's not very impressive, we did a phytolith analysis to see actually what people were doing. And we found a lot of areas that they were burnt, or assay layers, and what people they were doing. And we found out, and this is the work of a PhD student, Georgia Kasapidou, they were doing a lot of processing of cereals in the site. So that was something that we can see for the use of space as well. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of this combination of different proxies to interpret data. So for the sites of Agios Ozomenos, as I said, that we have evidence from storage, and then we have 2 other sites of Alhambra Katolakos excavated by Ευθυμία Alphas and the Department of Antiquities, and Palepafos Marcello excavated by Konstantinos Kopanias and the University of Athens. What we did to maximize, as I said, the information, we did wood analysis, seed analysis, phytoliths, and we introduced starch analysis as well. And this was not only from the sediments, but as you see here from the areas, because at Alhambra and Marcello are burial, they're not settlements. And we did that you can see there on pottery. Starch analysis can be done in groundstone tools as well, but we haven't done that. But for the pottery, we did the first indication, at least the work done by Kyriaki Tsitsi. We have found cereals in pottery. And the good thing, or the interesting thing, is that especially at Palepafos Marcello, you have very, very small plates that you wouldn't think that they would have food offerings, but they were, and it was at the entrance of the grave. So that's important for the burial and funerary practices. So, and this is the work has been published recently at the Journal of Archaeological Science Reports. So what we're interested, and I'm coming back to what I said in the beginning, we're not interested in the list of species, and that's why I try not to bore you with a list of species. What we're interested in, what people are doing. So how these seeds and these plant remains are transformed to food. And these are different ways of how we can do that. People were roasted cereals and pulses. They were making as gruel, the fragmented bulgur type that we have until today. And of course, they were processing more for flour making and then bread. So what we are doing for the groundstone tools, and apart from the starch and phytolith analysis, we're doing this use-wear analysis of the groundstone tools to see what kind of plant remains they were processed and what they were making. And and the focus is actually to see the culinary practices. And this is something very familiar in this part of the world. It could have been Greece, it could have been Jordan, it could have been Turkey, it could have been Cyprus. And because this is something that people with cereals and milk, very, very basic ingredients, they were making food. And they were making food that was not necessarily found as food or as seeds in their botanical record. We have this very nice gentleman here that is making bread. So all these bread or pies or other types of food, we can find them in our botanical record as lumps of black lumps. Okay, we don't know what they are. They're not seeds. So for this reason, we're using scanning electron microscope to actually see what these parts of food are. And I'm coming back to this very nice picture because all this, if you can see here, we have barley that it has been roasted. Here is rusks, and here is trahanas. I don't know how you call them in Jordan, but it's like cereals with milk, really. And yes, and these ones, apart from maybe these ones, or they have to be involved in some kind of fire accident, as I said. But if you think about it in the archaeological record, especially in settlements that you don't have big hearths or big furnaces, people were using just these, like 2 stones and nothing else. These, and the archaeologists in the audience, they can actually understand this. This is not very visible in the archaeological record. So we are trying to see from the plant remains the culinary practices and what people were actually doing and how they were creating food. So what we're trying to do in Cyprus, and this is a project that we have launched recently, and it's called Archives of the Land, Endangered Mediterranean Agricultural Crafts and Resilient Practices for a Sustainable Future. Very catchy. But the bottom line is that we're trying to see what people, older people, more isolated communities, not urban communities, are doing even now for their culinary practices and how they preserve their heritage. And if you go to the mountain villages of Cyprus, and I'm sure this is the case here, maybe even more, where people are doing and they're creating different foodstuffs, but very, very similar, different between them, but very, very similar to what we explored in the past. So we're doing experimental work. We're going to villages. People are opening their houses for us. So whatever they're cooking, especially based on cereals and pulses, we're taking a sample. We char it, so we know how it is in the archaeobotanical record. And then we have a basis to compare what we find at our excavations and see what actually people were doing. So we want to bring the past to the future, and we're safeguarding the living intangible heritage of Cyprus. These people, that they have this knowledge, because this knowledge is dying, and it's going to die together with a generation of people that they're not going to be with us for a very, very long time, for a long time from now. So we do ask the right questions, and the right questions that, why did you cultivate specific things in the mountains of Troodos or different things at the lowlands of Larnaca in Cyprus? And I'm sure that a lot of the answers that these people have are very similar of the agricultural practices that people were doing in prehistory. So I'm very pleased that we're doing a lot of work with wine producers, and this is Mr. Andreas. He's an exceptional personality. He has one of the best wineries in Cyprus up in the mountains. And what he does is that he practices sustainable agriculture. He doesn't manure with anything else but dunk if he does that. But he doesn't use pesticides. He doesn't do anything like it. So what he does, and he's something else when you're actually trying to listen to him, is that he goes around his vineyards, and when he observes, and then he actually acts on what the vines are telling him, and it's an exceptional thing that what he does there. And the other important thing that he does is that all his vineyards have indigenous grape varieties of Cyprus. So he produces wine with all varieties not coming from everywhere else, but only from Cyprus. Okay. If you can say organic, he is as organic as it can be. I'll give you one example, and we'll move forward, is that when I saw at some point at his vineyards that he had a lot of roses around. So I asked him, okay, are you a romantic with the roses, or is there a specific reason? And he said, okay, I am a romantic, but there is a very specific pest that attacks the grapes. And if actually it attacks the grapes, that's the end of them. So, but it attacks the roses first. So he does that, and when he sees that something goes wrong, in this case that the roses are attacked, he acts on his grapes and he saves them, which is amazing if you think about it, and it is as prehistoric as it can be, I think. So what else we're doing? This is the work of a group from the Cyprus Institute and Christos Zoumidis. What they did is that they were doing in mountain villages of Troodos, and we're actually talking about terraces and how you can actually build terraces, or and because they were in the landscape, but people didn't know how to preserve them. So from a very, very big European program, they took the funding, and they had workshops for the local communities of how to preserve the terraces. And because of the work that they did there, they focus on the aromatic and medicinal plants of Troodos. And now these plants are actually included in the catalog of intangible cultural heritage of Cyprus. So that was a very, very big step for them. Now, in my title, I put the Mediterranean diet, and this is the work of Juanjo Granero from Barcelona, Spain, that he has been doing a lot of work on that. When we're talking about Mediterranean diet, we think, okay, cereals, pulses, olive, a little bit of olive oil as a main source of fat, low animal fat intake, a little bit of wine consumption. And that goes back to medieval ages and certainly antiquity. But with what I have shown today and from other studies, it goes back to prehistory. And the presence of the Mediterranean triad, as we call it, which is wheat, olive, and grape, has been attested in the Bronze Age across the Mediterranean since the Bronze Age. And recent evidence, however, suggests that winemaking started during the Neolithic, and evidence for olive oil production dates back to the middle 5th millennium. And in the preparation of bulgur and trahanas, the very nice word that you said, but I can't remember it, it goes back in Bulgaria, for example, in early 6th millennium. And bread making has been attested in the Levant as early as 14,000 years ago. So this notion of Mediterranean diet goes back a long way. And of course, we have the widespread use of vegetables, herbs, and spices, and we can see that existing in classical and prehistoric times. So let's say that what we think that is the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean diet is considered that was used during the Bronze Age or even in the Neolithic. But what's going on now? What kind of Mediterranean diet do we have now? Do we really have Mediterranean diet? Personally, in Cyprus, we do have these elements, but we have so many other elements that they're not part of the Mediterranean diet at all, or the culinary practices that we had. And this is something, okay, that you expect, but now it has become so much that I don't know how we can use the term Mediterranean diet, even in places surrounding by the Mediterranean Sea. So I think that with the work we do, or I hope that the work we do with archaeobotany, we can actually contribute to valorization of the traditional Mediterranean diet as we have seen it through the millennia, and not only among us, the academics, but to a non-academic audience and to everyday people, and especially kids. So I'm going back and I'm finishing to Cyprus, and I'm very pleased to say that, and I mentioned it before, but apart from the late Bronze Age, that it was a lacuna in Cyprus, now we have a lot of work done for the first millennium, and Panagiotis Koulouros does a lot of work on wood charcoal in Cyprus. And now we are trying to combine isotope analysis, and Despina Markou is trying to go to that direction, so we can have all this information that we can for Cyprus, and not only for prehistory, but also for the historical periods. And here is one of the articles that it's coming out very soon from Journal of Archaeological Science report, showing exactly the shift that we have in Cyprus, and I think it's a key point in Cypriot archaeobotany, that we do care about the historical periods as well. I want us to show that for the audience, and for whatever we have talked about today, for the sampling strategies, or of what I talked about on archaeobotany, but for materials, animal bones, human remains, for sampling in the field and in the laboratory. This is an open access. If you Google the title, it will come, and it's free for you. And I'm finishing. We're doing a lot of outreach activities. We're going to schools. We talked about it a little bit earlier with the colleagues here. We have created these very nice leaflets, and these are for schools. And we have this as well, which is a small story. And it would have been, I think, something that we should explore, that we can do that for the English-speaking schools here at Amman, or we can translate this in Arabic, and you can have it for the schools here. And I think that this is going to open new collaborative projects, and I hope that we are going to start soon, and that we can see each other soon, and not soon, more often, and collaborate closer. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, Evi, thank you so much for such a fascinating talk. I suppose as an archaeometallurgist, it always amazes me the preservation potential and the diversity of analysis opportunities available to you for something that these things that are so minute and seemingly so fragile, but clearly not that fragile. So thank you for that. I love the school material, and I really like the idea of translating these into Arabic. So we'll definitely talk about that very, very soon.